Procurement Act 2023, Knowledge Drop Series for SME and VCSE suppliers, Part 1 of 3, Introduction. This series of knowledge drops is designed to provide an overview of the Procurement Act 2023. It is aimed at small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and voluntary community and social enterprises, VCSEs, who deliver contracts to the UK public sector, who take part in competitive procurements, or new entrants who would like to do so in the future. It explains the key changes to the previous regulations and how these may benefit SMEs and VCSEs when doing business with the UK public, utilities or defence sectors, or health and social care through the light touch regime, which has been retained in the Act as light touch contracts. In this series of knowledge drops, the Procurement Act refers to the Procurement Act and the regulations made under it. The purpose of this knowledge drop series: the government recognises the important role that SMEs and VCSEs play in the delivery of public services, social value and innovation. The Procurement Act contains a number of benefits for SMEs and VCSEs and reflects the government's commitment to removing barriers to accessing public contracts, either directly or indirectly as part of a supply chain. One key benefit of the Act is the new duty on contracting authorities to have regard for small and medium-sized suppliers. A range of other measures have also been introduced, including strengthened prompt payment provisions, a streamlined supplier registration system, and greater visibility of procurement opportunities. By the end of this knowledge drop series, you will have a greater awareness and understanding of the main changes under the new Procurement Act and how these may affect you and your organisation, the measures that may benefit how you do business with the public sector, the introduction of new, more flexible procedures and how they may help streamline how you engage with contracting authorities, how the Act enables you to demonstrate your capabilities as SMEs and VCSE organisations, the increased opportunities for negotiation, engagement and innovation, the new central digital platform and how its functionalities will reduce administration and make it easier for you to access new procurement opportunities covered by the Procurement Act, your obligations under the new rules as a supplier, and the key actions you may need to take and consider to prepare for the changes. There are some key differences between the Procurement Act and the regulations that preceded it. The Procurement Act is a simpler and more flexible set of rules that makes it easier for contracting authorities to undertake procurement activities that are fit for purpose and meet organisational needs, national and local objectives, and that deliver value for money. In order to take full advantage of these flexibilities, it is important that suppliers to the public, utilities and defence sectors understand the changes to the previous regulations and how these changes may affect the way you do business with contracting authorities. Who does the Procurement Act apply to? The Procurement Act applies to contracting authorities. The Act defines a contracting authority as either a public authority or, in relation to a utilities contract, a public authority, public undertaking or private utility. This typically includes central government departments and their arm length bodies, local authorities and NHS trusts, many schools and universities, some housing associations and health bodies. The Procurement Act applies to contracting authorities in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and to contracting authorities with reserved functions carrying out procurement in Scotland. Public procurement is a devolved issue, and Welsh ministers and Northern Ireland have chosen to join the Procurement Act. The Scottish Government will continue to have its own legislation regulating devolved Scottish authorities. However, regulations will allow Scottish contracting authorities to make use of certain contracts, such as frameworks established under the Act. The Procurement Act generally applies in full for contracting authorities covered by the Act when awarding, entering into and managing public contracts. Public contracts are contracts for goods, services or works where the value exceeds the threshold for the relevant contract, as detailed in Schedule 1 of the Act. SMEs and VCSEs should be aware of the Act and the duties that it places on contracting authorities. Some devolved Welsh and transferred Northern Ireland procurements are exempt from a small number of requirements of the Procurement Act. In addition, a number of other specific exemptions apply to certain utilities, defence and healthcare. Fact sheets with further information on those can be found on the Transferring Public Procurement page at gov.uk, along with other guidance published by the government. Why is there a new Procurement Act? At approximately £300 billion, public procurement accounts for around a third of all public expenditure every year. The value of government procurement with SMEs has steadily increased over the past 6 years, with the most recent figures showing an annual spend of £20.9 billion, an increase of £1.6 billion from the previous year, and accounting for almost 26.5% of central government spend. Prior to leaving the EU, UK public procurement legislation was tied to EU directives and consisted of 4 separate sets of regulations: the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, including the light touch regime, the Utilities Contracts Regulations 2016, the Defence and Security Public Contracts Regulations 2011, and the Concession Contracts Regulations 2016. Following the UK's exit from the EU, we have the opportunity to improve our procurement on how it is regulated, consolidated and streamlining 4 sets of regulations into one simplified set of rules for suppliers to follow. The Procurement Act now contains a duty for contracting authorities to have regard to SME participation and to reduce the barriers they may face. This also includes VCSEs that are small and medium-sized. The Procurement Act is designed to deliver a number of benefits to suppliers, including SMEs and VCSEs in particular, such as making it mandatory for contracting authorities to consider means other than audited accounts for companies not legally required to have audited accounts when assessing financial capacity, allowing suppliers to provide any required insurances needed to deliver the contract prior to contract award, at the point that they are notified their tender has been successful rather than at the point of tendering, increased visibility of new procurement opportunities through publication of commercial pipelines on the new central digital platform, greater scope for pre-market engagement, the ability to showcase innovation and supply innovative solutions via the new competitive flexible procedure discussed later, strengthen prompt payment provisions, more consistent feedback following a procurement exercise in the form of assessment summaries which may be accompanied by supplementary information akin to debrief or standstill letters, a simplified tendering process with a new digital central platform and a way of suppliers to submit their core business information. Contracting authorities will be offered access to a comprehensive learning and development programme to enable them to take full advantage of the new Act and deliver their obligations under it. Our international obligations. The Procurement Act ensures that the UK complies with its international commitments. These provide UK businesses access to overseas markets. The World Trade Organization Government Procurement Agreement alone gives UK businesses guaranteed access to £1.3 trillion in public procurement opportunities overseas. We will now outline some of the main changes in the Procurement Act and what the expected benefits are for SMEs and VCSEs. New procurement objectives and national priorities. From the start of a procurement, including the initial market engagement stage, all the way through to awarding a contract, contracting authorities will have to give appropriate consideration to the procurement objectives as set out in the Procurement Act. The objectives are delivering value for money. Although this is not a new concept, contracting authorities must aim to achieve the best mix of quality and price throughout the lifetime of the contract. As a supplier, you will be given the opportunity to demonstrate the value that you provide to that particular organisation and the communities that they serve, where this is non-discriminatory and linked to the delivery of the contract. Maximising public benefit. Contracting authorities must think about the extent to which the contract can deliver greater benefit, again allowing suppliers to showcase solutions that, for example, improve economic, environmental and social value. VCSEs in particular may be well placed to deliver public benefit and to contribute to economic growth, innovation and resilience. Sharing information. Transparency is still a key consideration, and contracting authorities will be required to share information with suppliers so that you can understand their policies and decisions. This is the minimum obligation, but further steps have been taken to embed improved transparency throughout the procurement lifecycle. Acting and importantly being seen to act with integrity. Contracting authorities are tasked with preventing fraud, corruption and misconduct by demonstrating good management and control over their processes, which should give you as a supplier confidence that contracts are being properly procured and managed. Treat suppliers the same. Contracting authorities are still required to treat suppliers the same when carrying out a procurement. and ensuring that you are competing for a contract under equal terms. This is unless there is a difference between suppliers which justifies different treatment. So for example, where there is a deadline for submission of tenders, the contracting authority should not accept late tenders from one supplier but not from others. That would be a clear breach of equal treatment. Similar points can be made in relation to any clear rules including other deadlines, word count limits, minimum quality or quantity standards, etc. Do not put a supplier at an unfair advantage or disadvantage. If different treatments of suppliers is justified, contracting authorities must take the appropriate steps to ensure they do not put a supplier at an unfair advantage or disadvantage. An example of different treatment might be where, as part of their preliminary market engagement activities, a contracting authority runs an event tailored to suppliers who are new to working with the public sector. Duty to SMEs. As mentioned earlier in this knowledge drop, the duty for contracting authorities to have regard to SME participation and to reduce the barriers they may face has become an explicit objective of the Procurement Act. The Act defines an SME as being a supplier that has fewer than 250 staff, as well as either a turnover of less than £44 million per year or a balance sheet total of less than £38 million, which is substantively the same as the existing definition under the PCRs and other regulations. The duty also applies to VCSEs who meet this criteria. To put this duty in practical terms, contracting authorities will need to specifically consider procurements from an SME's perspective, avoid any potential barriers and address challenges that may face throughout the procurement lifecycle. Some examples include whether there is a diverse representation of suppliers in pre-market engagement to make sure a contracting authority is reaching a wide range of potential suppliers, whether their requirements, e.g. supplier size, financial capacity, insurance levels and technical capability are proportionate to delivery of the contract, whether the tender response times are realistic when some SMEs and VCSEs do not have a dedicated bidding team. National Procurement Policy Statement and Wales Procurement Policy Statement. Alongside these objectives, the Procurement Act also provides a power for ministers to publish a National Procurement Policy Statement, which will set out the national strategic priorities for public procurement and how contracting authorities in England and those exercising non-devolved functions in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland can support the delivery. Contracting authorities must have regard to the relevant priorities alongside other local priorities when carrying out procurements. Welsh ministers have the power to publish a Wales Procurement Policy Statement which will set out the strategic direction for public procurement in Wales. It will set out principles, considerations and intended outcomes that devolved Welsh authorities must have regard to whilst undertaking public procurements. The National Procurement Policy Statement and the Wales Procurement Policy Statement will give you greater visibility of the national priorities that will be considered during the procurements of appropriate contracts. These may include principles that will benefit SMEs and VCSEs, such as promoting local and cross-sector collaboration and maximising delivery of social value through public procurements. Procurement policy statements may encourage procurement which can develop diverse and resilient local supply chains consisting of local enterprises, SMEs, employee-owned businesses, social enterprises, cooperatives and other forms of local ownership. This will help to provide you with a steer on where you can best allocate resources to tender for new opportunities, while still enabling you to tailor your proposals to best match any relevant local priorities, all of which will be clearly set out in the tender documents for every procurement. The National Procurement Policy Statement and the Wales Procurement Policy Statement may be amended or replaced at any point following the required consultation and approval by Parliament. Northern Ireland will continue to implement public procurement policy through procurement policy notes. Recap. You should now understand the purpose of the Procurement Act, including the reasons for the new Procurement Act, that there are some exemptions that apply to certain authorities and contracts, the Procurement Objectives and the National Procurement Policy Statement and Welsh Procurement Policy Statement that must be considered in your procurement. In Part 2 of this Knowledge Drop series, we will cover new requirements for contracting authorities to complete conflicts of interest assessments, how the Act makes it easier for suppliers to participate in procurements through the introduction of a new central digital platform and early market engagement, understanding the full range of value for money considerations that contracting authorities may consider in their procurements, changes to procurement procedures, including the new competitive flexible procedure and grounds for direct award, the introduction of new open frameworks and dynamic markets.
This material has been produced for the purpose of learning and development and does not constitute and should not be relied upon as legal advice. This material is accurate as at October 2023. Fact sheets for the following exemptions can be found on gov.uk. Concessions, light touch, defence and security, Northern Ireland, Wales, schools, utilities. End of animation.